My manager fired me 3 weeks before my 25-year pension kicked in, saying I was no longer a good fit for company culture. When I asked HR about my pension, they said employment was terminated before vesting period completed. I just smiled and said, "You're absolutely right about company culture." Then I sent everything to the labor board. I'm Robert, 47 years old, and until 3 weeks ago I thought loyalty and hard work actually meant something in the corporate world. I was wrong, but the way I found out and what I did about it has turned into the biggest scandal my company has ever faced. I started working at Henderson Manufacturing right out of high school in 1999. It's a mid-sized company that makes industrial equipment, and when I was hired, they had about 150 employees. The company had a solid reputation, good benefits, and most importantly, a pension plan that vested after 25 years of service. 25 years. That was the magic number that would secure my retirement. The pension was generous too. After 25 years, I'd be entitled to 60% of my final salary for life, plus full health benefits. It was the kind of old-school benefit package that doesn't exist anymore, but Henderson had kept it as a way to retain loyal employees. I worked my way up from the warehouse floor to senior quality control supervisor over the years. I never missed a day unless I was genuinely sick, I stayed late when needed, I trained new employees, and I consistently received excellent performance reviews. I genuinely loved my job and took pride in the quality of work our company produced. The problem started 18 months ago when Henderson hired a new operations manager named Derek Walsh. Derek was 35, had an MBA from some prestigious university, and came from a larger corporation that had modernized their operations. From day one, he made it clear that he thought Henderson was stuck in the past. Derek immediately started implementing changes. He eliminated the company Christmas party to reduce unnecessary expenses. He cut the employee break room budget and removed the free coffee. He instituted new efficiency metrics that basically meant everyone had to work faster for the same pay. Most concerning to me, he kept talking about how the company needed to shed legacy costs to remain competitive. I had a bad feeling about what legacy costs meant, but I kept my head down and did my job. I figured if I just continued to be an exemplary employee, I'd be fine. I only had 3.5 years left until my pension vested. Derek seemed to have a particular problem with me from the start. He would question my decisions in front of other employees, second-guess procedures I'd been following successfully for years, and generally treat me like I was incompetent. When I tried to explain why certain quality control processes were important, he'd cut me off and say things like, "That's not how we do things in the modern business world." The situation got worse when Derek hired his nephew, Tyler, as a management trainee 6 months ago. Tyler was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree, and had zero experience in manufacturing or quality control. But Derek immediately started grooming him for leadership roles and having him shadow various department heads. I tried to be welcoming to Tyler and offered to teach him about quality control processes. The kid was actually pretty smart and seemed eager to learn, but it became obvious that Derek had bigger plans for him than just training. 3 months ago, Derek started documenting every minor issue he could find with my work. If I was 5 minutes late coming back from lunch, he'd make a note. If I questioned one of his new procedures, he'd write it up as resistance to change. If I suggested an improvement to a process, he'd frame it as failure to follow established protocols. I could see what was happening, but I didn't know how to fight it. I'd never been in trouble at work before, and suddenly I was getting written up for things that had never been issues in 24 years of employment. 2 months ago, I requested a meeting with Derek to address the situation directly. I told him I felt like I was being targeted and asked if there was something specific I could do to improve our working relationship. His response was chilling. "Robert, the truth is that you represent old thinking," he said. "Henderson needs to evolve to survive, and that means making some hard decisions about personnel. Employees who can't adapt to change become liabilities." I asked him if my job was in jeopardy, and he said, "That depends entirely on your ability to embrace the new direction of this company." I left that meeting knowing I was in trouble, but I didn't know what to do about it. I contacted our union representative, but Henderson had eliminated the union 5 years before Derek arrived. I considered talking to HR, but our HR department consisted of one person, Janet, who reported directly to Derek. 3 weeks ago, everything came to a head. Derek called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and told me that Henderson was restructuring the quality control department and my position was being eliminated. "This isn't personal, Robert," he said, not looking me in the eye. "It's just business. The company is moving in a different direction, and unfortunately, your role no longer fits our operational model." I asked about severance and was told I'd receive 2 weeks' pay, which was the minimum required by law. When I asked about my pension, Derek said that since my employment was being terminated before the 25-year vesting period, I wouldn't be eligible for benefits. "But I'm 3 weeks away from 25 years, I said. "I understand that, and I'm sorry about the timing," Derek replied. "But the decision was based on business needs, not your timeline." I knew he was lying. This wasn't about business needs or restructuring. This was about eliminating an expensive pension obligation by firing me just before I qualified for benefits. But instead of arguing or getting emotional, I just nodded and said, "You're absolutely right about company culture, Derek. Henderson has definitely changed." He looked relieved that I wasn't going to make a scene. "I'm glad you understand. We'll have Janet process your final paperwork on Monday. I cleaned out my desk that afternoon while Derek watched from his office. As I packed up 24 years' worth of personal items, I noticed Tyler sitting at a desk nearby, reviewing quality control manuals. When I asked him what he was working on, he said Derek had asked him to familiarize himself with the QC processes for a new project. It all clicked into place. They weren't eliminating my position, they were giving it to Tyler. Derek was firing me 3 weeks before my pension vested so he could hire his nephew into my job without having to pay my benefits. That weekend, I did some research. I looked up employment laws, pension regulations, and wrongful termination statutes. What I found was very interesting. First, firing someone specifically to prevent them from receiving pension benefits is illegal under federal law. It's called pension discrimination and it's taken very seriously by the Department of Labor. Second, if a company fires someone close to their pension vesting date and then hires someone to do substantially the same job, it creates a presumption of discriminatory intent. Third, I discovered that Derek's nephew Tyler had been posting on social media about his new job at Henderson, including pictures of himself at my desk and captions like "Uncle got me the perfect position and quality control supervisor in training." Monday morning, I didn't go to the office to process my termination paperwork. Instead, I drove to the Department of Labor office and filed a formal complaint for pension discrimination and age discrimination. I also contacted the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and filed a complaint there. Then I called a lawyer who specialized in employment law. When I told him my story and showed him Tyler's social media posts, he immediately agreed to take my case on contingency. "This is one of the most blatant cases of pension discrimination I've ever seen," he said. "They didn't even try to hide what they were doing." We spent the next week gathering evidence. My lawyer obtained Tyler's social media posts before Derek could tell him to delete them. We collected my performance reviews from the past 24 years, which showed excellent ratings right up until Derek arrived. We documented the timeline of Derek's nephew being hired and trained for my position. Most importantly, we discovered that I wasn't the only long-time employee Derek had targeted. Over the past 18 months, he had fired 3 other employees who were close to pension vesting, including a 28-year veteran in accounting and a 26-year veteran in shipping. 2 weeks after my termination, my lawyer sent a demand letter to Henderson's legal department. We weren't just seeking my job back and pension rights, we were demanding a full investigation into Derek's pattern of targeting long-time employees and a review of all recent terminations. Henderson's response was to offer me a small settlement in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. They wanted to pay me the equivalent of 6 months' salary to go away quietly and never talk about what happened. My lawyer's response was to file a federal lawsuit and contact the local news media. Update 1. The story broke in our local newspaper 2 weeks ago with a headline: "Local company accused of firing workers to avoid pension payments." The reporter had done her homework and interviewed 2 other employees who'd been fired under similar circumstances. The article included quotes from Tyler's social media posts about getting his uncle's help with the job, and it featured a photo of me standing outside Henderson's offices holding a sign that read "24 years of loyalty, fired 3 weeks before pension." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The newspaper's website crashed from traffic, and the story was picked up by regional news outlets. Henderson's phones were flooded with calls from angry customers and former employees sharing their own stories. Derek tried to do damage control by releasing a statement saying my termination was purely based on performance issues and that any suggestion of pension discrimination was completely unfounded. Unfortunately for Derek, my lawyer had already provided the media with copies of my excellent performance reviews from the past 24 years. The Department of Labor investigation moved quickly once the story went public. They requested all of Henderson's personnel files for the past 3 years, focusing specifically on employees who were terminated close to pension vesting dates. What they found was damning. In addition to me and the 2 other employees I knew about, they discovered that Derek had fired 6 longtime employees over 18 months, all between 18 to 36 months before their pensions would have vested. The total savings to the company in avoided pension costs was estimated at over $2.8 million. Meanwhile, Tyler's social media posts were causing their own problems. In addition to bragging about getting my job through his uncle's connections, he had posted pictures from inside the plant that violated company confidentiality policies. He'd also made several posts complaining about having to work with old people who don't understand technology. The posts went viral on local social media, with people sharing screenshots and commenting about nepotism and age discrimination. Someone created a Facebook page called Justice for Henderson Workers that gained 5,000 followers in 3 days. Henderson's board of directors called an emergency meeting and hired an outside law firm to conduct an internal investigation. The company's stock price, they're publicly traded on a small exchange, dropped 15% in a week as investors worried about potential legal liability. Update 2. 1 month after my termination, Derek Walsh was fired. Henderson announced that they were parting ways with Derek effective immediately and that they would be reviewing all recent personnel decisions to ensure compliance with federal employment laws. They also announced that Tyler's employment had been terminated for violation of company social media policies. The internal investigation found exactly what we knew they'd find: a systematic pattern of targeting longtime employees to avoid pension costs. The law firm recommended that Henderson immediately reinstate all wrongfully terminated employees and honor their pension commitments. I was officially offered my job back with full back pay, restoration of my seniority, and immediate vesting of my pension benefits. The other terminated employees received similar offers. But here's where it gets interesting: I turned down the job offer. After 24 years of loyalty to Henderson, I realized I didn't want to work for a company that would hire someone like Derek in the first place. More importantly, I'd already found something better. During the media attention around my case, I was contacted by Henderson's biggest competitor, Apex Industrial. They offered me a position as their senior quality control manager at a 30% higher salary than I'd been making at Henderson, plus immediate entry into their pension plan with credit for my years of experience. "We need someone with your integrity and experience," the Apex hiring manager told me. "What Henderson did to you is exactly the kind of behavior our company stands against." I accepted the job offer and sent Henderson a formal rejection of their reinstatement offer. In my letter, I wrote, "After careful consideration, I've decided that Henderson's company culture is not aligned with my values. I wish you success in rebuilding the trust you've lost with your employees and community." The lawsuit is still proceeding because even though Henderson offered me my job back, they haven't admitted wrongdoing or agreed to pay damages for the emotional distress and financial uncertainty they caused. My lawyer says we have a strong case for punitive damages given the deliberate nature of their actions. The Department of Labor investigation resulted in Henderson being fined $450,000 for pension discrimination violations. They were also required to establish new policies and oversight to prevent future violations. Update 3. 3 months later, and the fallout continues to affect Henderson in ways they never anticipated. The Justice for Henderson Workers Facebook page has grown to over 15,000 followers and has become a forum for current and former Henderson employees to share their experiences. The stories that have emerged paint a picture of a company culture that became increasingly toxic under Derek's leadership. Several current employees have posted about being afraid to take sick days or vacation time because they worry about being labeled as not committed to the company. Others have shared stories about being pressured to work unpaid overtime to meet Derek's efficiency metrics. The most damaging revelation came from a former HR employee who posted about being instructed by Derek to find performance issues with specific longtime employees. She shared email screenshots showing Derek specifically requesting documentation that could be used to justify terminating employees who were approaching pension eligibility. Henderson's reputation in the community has been severely damaged. 3 major customers have terminated their contracts, citing concerns about the company's ethical practices and employee treatment. The local Chamber of Commerce removed Henderson from their board of directors. The company has been struggling to hire replacement workers, especially for skilled positions. Word has spread throughout the industry about what happened, and experienced workers are reluctant to trust a company that would fire someone 3 weeks before their pension vested. Meanwhile, my new job at Apex has been everything I hoped for. The company culture is completely different. They actually value experience and treat employees like human beings rather than disposable resources. I'm working on quality improvements that could save them millions of dollars, and my suggestions are welcomed rather than dismissed. The irony is that Henderson is now struggling with quality control issues since firing me and the other experienced employees. They've had 2 major product recalls in the past month, and one of their biggest customers has threatened to find a new supplier if the problems continue. Tyler, Derek's nephew, apparently couldn't find another job after his social media posts went viral. According to someone who knows the family, he's had several interview opportunities fall through once potential employers Googled his name and found the news articles about the Henderson scandal. Derek himself has struggled to find new employment. My lawyer tells me that several companies have contacted him for references during Derek's job search, and word has spread throughout the industry about his practices at Henderson. Final update. 6 months later, and I can honestly say that getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to my career. The lawsuit against Henderson was settled out of court for a significant amount that I can't disclose due to the settlement agreement. What I can say is that it was enough to ensure my financial security even beyond what my original pension would have provided. Henderson has struggled to recover from the scandal. They've had 3 more major customers terminate contracts, and they've laid off about 40% of their workforce. There are rumors that they're considering bankruptcy or selling to a larger company. The company brought in a new management team that has been trying to rebuild their reputation, but the damage seems to be permanent. They've reached out to several of the wrongfully terminated employees, including me, asking us to consider writing statements about how the company has changed. We've all declined. My work at Apex has been incredibly fulfilling. I've been promoted twice in 6 months and am now Director of Quality Assurance for the entire company. My pension plan here will actually be more generous than what I would have received at Henderson, and I'm working with people who respect my experience and expertise. The best part is that Apex has hired 3 other former Henderson employees who were also victims of Derek's discrimination. We've formed an incredibly strong quality control team, and our improvements have helped Apex win several major contracts, including 2 that Henderson lost due to their quality problems. The Department of Labor investigation led to changes in federal pension oversight that will make it harder for companies to pull what Henderson did. The case has been cited in several employment law articles and has become an example of how not to handle long-time employees. I've been contacted by employment lawyers representing other workers who faced similar discrimination, and I've testified in 2 other cases as an expert witness. It's satisfying to know that my experience is helping other workers protect their rights. Most importantly, I've learned that loyalty should go both ways. For 24 years, I gave Henderson everything I had, assuming that loyalty would be reciprocated. When it wasn't, I discovered that my skills and experience were valuable enough that better opportunities were waiting. To anyone facing similar situations, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight for what you've earned. Companies that would steal your pension don't deserve your loyalty, and there are employers out there who will value what you bring to the table. Sometimes getting fired from the wrong job is exactly what you need to find the right one. Derek thought he was ending my career 3 weeks before my pension vested. Instead, he gave me the push I needed to find a much better career with a company that actually deserves my loyalty. Henderson learned the hard way that treating employees as disposable has consequences. And I learned that 24 years of experience and integrity are worth more than any pension they could have given me.